Thank you. Well, this is a great pleasure. This is a terrific book. It was a pleasure to read it. It's a book about words, but about how words are born, what they're used for, sometimes how they die. And it is extremely amusing, but also very enlightening, like everything else that Jonathon does. And I thought I would read a little synopsis that he has here in his introduction about what the book is about, and then maybe we'd start by talking about the nature of jargon, because it's an interesting and funny topic. There are 28 words in the book. And what Jonathon says is, what emerges when these 28 dispatches are surveyed together is a remarkable symbiosis between scientific and lexical innovation, a potent co-evolution. Ideas inspire words, which inform ideas ad infinitum. In technology, this kind of process is known as bootstrapping. It's another piece of jargon, and the word is apt, perhaps more appropriate than coevolution, because language is a technology, arguably our first, possibly our most resilient, developing with us as a species and facilitating all other technological advances from agricultural to the internet. The language of technology and science illuminates the science and technology of language. Virtual words captures the internal workings of language from this techno-scientific vantage. So words come out of ideas, and then ideas create the words. I mean, how do you see that?
Well, I see language as being at once a very good way into ideas for those of us who are on the outside of both, and also on the outside of science and technology, as I am. But also, I think that within the realm of science and technology, there is a way in which words become kind of an operating system, so to speak, that can be used to operate new technologies, to operate new areas of science, that science and technology can use words as pivots and as a means of, as I say in the book, a means of bootstrapping. But also that inevitably in science and technology there's something new, or at least that's what the scientists and technologists want you to believe. And whether or not there is something new, new words are a way of advertising that, certainly, and also they are a way of working with those new ideas in some sense that is communicative, that allows multiple people in multiple realms to work together toward the next science or a new technology yet again.
Well, but they're also a way of kind of conveying that you're a member of a certain secret cult, that you know the jargon, and therefore you're sort of part of this little group. And we were talking before about the different kinds of jargon that there are. I mean, there's military jargon, you know, where I had a boss once who would always have to field strip things and run it up the flagpole and hump it up the hill and stuff like that. And that's the way he spoke. There's sports jargon, you know, you get into the red zone, you know, and you push it over the goal line. And when you start to look at all these ways of, there's corporate speak, you know, where, you know, you don't fire people anymore, you decruit them. So, you know, there's a certain sense in, you know, when you talk about the jargon, that it's also kind of covering up for something else, that it's almost they're almost euphemisms in a way.
Well, I think that the idea that there's a club is apt. I would almost use the term guild, that in fact what tends to happen is that people in a given profession, and that profession can be corporate or criminal, and perhaps there's not such a distinction between the two, that someone in a given field signifies membership in that field to others in that field through the language that is used, and also ensures that others who are not of that field don't entirely know what's going on. It's a protective measure in a sense. While at the same time, of course, it is a badge of identity in the world more broadly, so that perhaps someone who is not in the military at the time period that your boss was would maybe not know exactly what the terms meant, but would know that he was a drill sergeant back in the day, and that probably was the attitude that he had toward his underlings.
Well, I'm thinking also like of surfer jargon, which has permeated all business life, you know. I mean, you're looking at it like a 65-year-old guy in a three-piece suit, and he's calling you dude.
And that, too, of course, is a way in which that 65-year-old can signify that he's not or she's not yet ready for retirement.
That's right. Right, yeah. And let's look at some of the words because they're tremendously fun. And there's this combination of sort of deep but also kind of funny and weird. Let's talk about the cloud, for instance. It's an interesting chapter. What is the cloud? I'm going to ask Jonathan to translate some of these terms that we might not know. As
the term suggests, it's rather amorphous exactly what the cloud is. The cloud is a term for the web, only perhaps it is a different way of looking at the web rather than in terms of the connections that exist, in terms of the amorphous quality of everything taken together as it is growing and growing in a way that nobody quite knows who is in control or where exactly they are.
Well, for instance, the cloud would be instead of when you come back from your vacation, putting all of your pictures on your hard drive, you put them up on Flickr. So now Flickr has possession of your most treasured memories, and you've got, an empty hard drive. I find the whole thing kind of threatening and upsetting, frankly. I mean, I don't like the cloud.
Well, as we were speaking about earlier as well, the cloud has a very friendly sound to it, a very friendly quality that perhaps is meant by a company such as Flickr or Facebook to make you think that everything will be okay.
They don't want to call it gigantic machine that holds all of your information, so they call it the cloud.
Well, and the web had many other potential names before it was called the web, such as the mesh. And I think that were it called the mesh, perhaps, aside from the fact that mesh rhymes with mess, which apparently was why Tim Berners-Lee rejected it, I think that also the mesh has a sort of quality to it, sound like it comes out of the Matrix or something, and perhaps we would feel a little bit less comfortable, yes. Right. Though, of course, the web, one thinks of a spider and perhaps getting eaten.
Yes, that's nice. How about, here's one that I like, BACN, bacon. Bacon. What is bacon? This is an example of a failed piece of jargon, by the way.
Indeed, very much so. Bacon, BACN, like Flickr, FLICKR, was a term that was come up with by some people who thought themselves terribly clever at a social networking conference for email or for spam that you have signed up for and that you want to read, but not right now. So a Facebook update, for example, might be an example of this. And it was a term that was invented by people who were having a conversation about Canadian bacon, which turned out to be called P-mill bacon by some others of unspecified origin, and P-mill rhymed with email to some ears in the room, and therefore it ended up that Canadian bacon became the basis of a whole new sort of spam.
This is when people have too much time on their hands. And why didn't the word succeed?
Well, I think precisely for the reason that I just brought up.
No spam, right? Everybody knows spam. We know the words that have caught on, that have gotten traction.
And spam is the single most common word on the internet, if one is to believe Google. Bacon, well, most people don't know what it is anymore. And I think that the reason why spam caught on to such an extent and bacon did not has to do with the fact that spam emerged organically out of necessity. There was this phenomenon, not something that we much cared for, something, in fact, that most people absolutely loathed. And when there was a word for it, everyone grasped hold of it. But in the case of bacon, well, I mean, who really cares?
I guess bacon would be, I signed up with, to get messages from Barack Obama. in the last election, and now my Gmail, basically between David Plouffe and Barack Obama, I get 40 emails a week, literally. So is that bacon?
Well, it depends on whether he's writing them personally to you or not.
He says he is.
Then it's bacon.
Okay, good. How about flog? There's a word that didn't. There are flogs. Who's a flog? What's a flogger?
Well, a flog is a Flack blog, and this term came about around 5 years or so ago when Walmart decided to try to give the appearance that people liked it. And as implausible as that may sound, namely liking Walmart, apparently they managed to convince some people of this by staging a Walmarting Across America blog that was paid for by Walmart by a couple who apparently enjoyed going to every single Walmart in the country. This was, of course, ultimately discovered, and the furor over it resulted in what was, at least briefly, the need for a new derisive term, and that term was flog, in the grand tradition of what a publicist does to flog a new product, for example.
An honorable occupation, by the way.
Indeed.
Okay. One thing that's kind of interesting is that people are very derisive about commercialism on the web, and yet I think when you boil it right down at this point, Twitter, Facebook are all essentially marketing tools. If you have a new book, if you have any kind of new product, I get tweets every day from Burger King saying, hey, the new BK broiler is in. So, it's hard to see the validity or utility of something like that.
Well, this is one of the many reasons that I don't have a cell phone.
You're hard to reach.
Indeed. That is the primary reason.
Well, but let's talk about Twitter. Let's talk about tweeting for a while, because that's a perfectly good example of a piece of jargon. Well, is it, though? Twitter is the service that the geniuses invented, right?
Well, it isn't even quite that clear. So to send a message on Twitter might be to Twitter, but it might equally be to tweet. And while Twitter is proprietary in the sense that there is a trademark protecting it, tweet is not, despite the fact that Twitter retrospectively attempted to get a trademark on tweet as well, realizing that, in fact, this valuable property created by others was one that they wanted as well as the platform.
Tweet.
The word tweet.
But their logo's a bird.
Their logo is a bird, and Twitter is a reference to bird speak, to what birds do. There is, in fact, a Disney song, Everything is Twitter-pated in the Spring. And that may be the earliest example of Twitter being used with respect to birds in a cute, cartoonish sort of way for commercial ends.
And so but in what way is tweet then a piece of jargon as opposed to a verb that describes what you're doing when you're twittering?
I don't know that there's any real difference. A piece of jargon is a piece of jargon from somebody's standpoint if that person is outside of that particular spectrum of activity, as I am, for example. So for me, most everything that happens in the realm of science and technology is jargon, and I have great interest in it because I stand outside, but I think that what little insight I might be able to claim also comes from being outside, in the sense of being an anthropologist, entering into society that I am not a part of, and observing these odd artifacts. In this case, these artifacts are words. So for me, tweet is actually very much a word belonging to a guild of which I am not a member, and I don't really know how they work in any sort of tangible way, but that just gives me, I believe, in spite of the ignorance that it ensures, gives me a certain degree of perspective.
Yeah, well, in this case, ignorance really is bliss. Sometimes these words actually